All right. So today we're going to talk about a couple different things, and I've broken it up into three major sections. The first is going to be preparation. So just looking at how you can get ready for travel ahead of time. While abroad, things that you need to consider. And then we're also going to look at some virtual tours, which are not quite the same as being able to travel and go different places, but will allow you to kind of get out there and explore a little bit and maybe, kind of help that travel bug just a little bit. So the first thing that you, not the first, but one of the important things that you're going to need to do before you're going to travel internationally is make sure that you have a passport. If you don't already have a passport, you can apply for one through the State Department. A lot of it's kind of like the processing is usually in coordination with the State Department and the post office, actually. So usually when you have to make your appointments to submit your applications, that is done through a post office, but you can go to that link and find out all of the information on like what kind of documents that you need, what you need to submit, all of that kind of thing. There is like an application form, but usually the documents that you need to include are things like evidence of US citizenship, which is going to look differently for different people, your identification, a photo, and a processing fee. Now, currently, just like with a lot of other things, the processing time has been affected by COVID. And so if you feel like you're going to want to travel, I think everybody at this point probably wants to travel a little bit right now, but just be aware that there is a delay in processing. So choosing a location. I think for some people, there are locations that they're interested in that you've probably been dreaming about forever. And if somebody asks you, where you want to go or where you want to go first, you immediately know kind of the answer to that question. But for some people, maybe you're kind of open to a lot of different places, or you're not really sure about what you might be interested in. And in that case, you kind of want to narrow down your options, right? So, try thinking about what you're interested in. Are you, a museum person? You want to see like, artwork or sculptures? Are you interested in architecture or, certain kinds of architecture? Is it like natural beauty and, being able to be outside in like really cool new climates? Food, perhaps. There are absolutely people that travel just for food. And then there are also, historical sites or other things that, might be drawing you. So like, what are the things that you're passionate about? Once you've kind of thought about that, make sure to check that those areas are going to be open and available while you're traveling. Different countries are going to have different, national holidays, different religious holidays, and they're not always going to line up with ours. So it is important to make sure that you're actually going to be able to get into those locations that drew you to that place. Of course, your budget is also going to be really important. And one thing I think it is important to do is don't like set aside a certain amount of money and say, and then plan your vacation or your trip or your study abroad program like right up to that limit. Make sure that you're building a cushion in there, because there are almost always going to be unexpected expenses that occur, and you don't want to be, out of the country or away from home and finding that you're running low on funds. I'm going to have a little sample budget in a minute here, but you're going to want to consider things like lodging, transportation, food, entry fees, and these are things that you can research online. I mentioned these two websites, Savvy Backpacker and Budget Your Trip, so that if you want, you can be like, oh, how much do I need to plan for, food for a day in Paris? And they're going to kind of give you an idea of like the average amount that you're going to spend. Now, you always want to take into consideration your personal spending habits. So if you tend to kind of splurge at home, you're probably not going to be like a super budget traveler while you are abroad. So just take that kind of thing into consideration. Also compare to see if those recommendations are consistent. If one website is saying like, oh yeah, you need like $30 for a dinner, and another one is saying like, oh, like most places you can get a cheap dinner for $10. take that into consideration, that information might not be quite as reliable. You also want to consider the location safety, obviously. And there are a couple different ways that you can do that. First of all, I would not recommend just kind of relying on, assumptions about places. Make sure that you are actually basing your decision on, good information. So check out the US State Department. They have a travel advisory for every country and even some regions within countries. You can check the CDC, you can check travel sites. Sometimes there will be travel advisories because circumstances change and sometimes areas become safe that were not before and vice versa. Consider also identities that may impact your safety for that area. If you are going to certain locations, your gender, your race, whether you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community may impact your experience. And you want to make sure to take that into consideration. And that information is usually available, online. And you can kind of go take a look and just see kind of what you need to be aware of ahead of time. And also do a little bit of research to see like what's going on in that country. Is there going to be an election? Maybe near the time that you're visiting? Is it expected to be a particularly contentious election? Are there political demonstrations that might be going on? Are there strikes? This isn't necessarily to say that if that stuff is happening, you shouldn't go there, but just something that you want to be aware of ahead of time. So this is just a little sample budget, and obviously like you can create something however you want, but I do recommend doing a budget beforehand. And that's not just because I am kind of like a travel nerd and I like to make lots of like lists and budgets and plans, because it is really easy to forget to add things up. And then all of a sudden you're over your budget or you're spending more than you really wanted to. So in this case, this is just a 4-day vacation, but as you can see, the flight is going to be quite a big chunk of that. So, but like things like, snacks, if you're like, okay, I need to have, make sure that I'm going to be able, if I want to get like a coffee in the middle of the day, or if I just want like, something in the afternoon, a gelato or something, that you have the funds for that. But that all of a sudden is up to almost $100. So just things that you want to take into consideration. And then as you can see here, my total budget was $2,750 and my total expenses were only $2,285. So I did build in that little budget, kind of like cushion, just in case something did come up. Like maybe all of a sudden you didn't realize that this festival was happening. It looks really amazing and you want to go. So it's a good idea just to do that. So if you're going to be going somewhere that you need to fly to, obviously you need to go ahead and book your flight. There are all kinds of advice. There's all kinds of advice out there about like tips and tricks on how to get like the cheapest flight possible or the best rate. I think from personal experience and from the research that I've done that these are some solid recommendations. There really isn't like a magic trick that you can do, unfortunately, to get like a super cheap flight. But there are a couple things that you can do to better your chances. The first is to be flexible in the days that you fly. So, if you're like, okay, I'm going to get there Sunday and leave Sunday, the more flexible that you can be in those dates, the more possible savings that you can find. Maybe flying out on like a Tuesday and coming back on a Tuesday is going to be more affordable. So if you can just be a little bit flexible there, you could save, a couple $100s even. Also being flexible in your location. So if you're interested in a few different spots and maybe you're having trouble deciding, there are websites, Skyscanner, Momondo, Google Flights, which allow you to select just your departure city and then shows you like the possible locations that you can go to and how much they cost. So I think that that's a really cool tool because sometimes, you might see a really affordable flight to somewhere that you didn't consider going to before, and that can kind of open up, your options and maybe make you willing to explore places that you hadn't considered before. You also want to make sure to check what fees are not included. It's really tempting to look at those like budget airlines and be like, oh, awesome, this flight I can get here for like $100. But then if you look, it's like you have to pay not only for your checked bags, but your carry-on bags. Do you have to pay for your seat selection? And is that important to you? Like I am not willing to just like leave it to chance what seat I'm getting. So I always want to make sure that I can select my seat ahead of time. And for some fares, that's going to be included. And some, like on those budget airlines, you're going to have to pay more for that. So you do want to take into consideration that once you add on all of the additional things that you're going to need, like make sure you're still saving money. Also consider checking individual airline like websites. So some lower cost airlines like Southwest don't advertise on comparison sites. So if you go to like Kayak or Skyscanner or Google Flights, you are only going to see the websites or the airlines that have opted into providing their information to that organization. You can also set up flight alerts. So if you're like if you don't have a super, like a really quick deadline, you know, you're like, hey, sometime next year around this time, I want to travel. You can set up flight alerts so that you'll get notified when fares drop. You can do it on websites like Kayak and Google Flights. I've used an app in the past called Hopper, which will like notify me if a particular location I'm looking at has dropped. And sometimes these places will even give you kind of like predictions. Now, I would not recommend, you know, using that as like some kind of like glass ball, or crystal ball, not glass ball, crystal ball, but they do use data in order to predict whether flights are going to go up and down. So, you know, that can be a good tool just to make sure that you are catching any like quick flight drops. And then there are newsletters and websites that will share special deals. I have two on here. One is Scott's Cheap Flights and the other is Airfare Watchdog. And what happens is, so I know for Scott's Cheap Flights, there's like a free version and a premium version. I have the free version. And they'll like email me if all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, hey, you know, there's a really great flight deal to Hong Kong right now. It costs $500 right now. Usually it costs this much. You know, we expect that this deal is going to last 2 days. So you can kind of get notified about those, you know, really great deals, and that can be sometimes quite a bit of savings. So if you're willing to like deal with a couple more emails in your inbox, that can be another good option as well. Does anybody else have any like tricks or websites or tools that you've used to find really affordable flights? You know, feel free to drop it in the chat if you have, and we can kind of unmute you so you can talk about it a little bit. Cool. All right. Well, either I just found everything that you guys have ever used, or there's just, you know, not a lot out there right now. So next, we're going to talk about creating an itinerary. And there are people kind of on like both sides of this. Some people are like, you know, I want to have every moment of my day planned out. And some people are like, I am not going to plan anything, and I'm just going to kind of go where the wind blows me. I don't think that you need to plan out every moment of your day. You don't want to overbook yourself because you don't want to try to do too many things. But I do think it can be good to at least have a list of like some of the main things that you want to do or main things that you want to hit. Another thing I would suggest is when you're going to a place like Europe, it can be really tempting to be like, oh my God, I can get this train pass and hit like 6 countries in 10 days. I wouldn't recommend doing that just because, you know, if you're doing that many places in that few of days, you know, you're not really giving yourself time to really enjoy any one particular location. So it is better, I think, to do, you know, 1 or 2 locations so that you can really, you know, get the feel for that area, really like delve into those cities and experience the culture and everything that they have to offer. If you are one of those people that loves to plan out your itineraries, hopefully, you know, expect interruptions and be flexible about changes. Chances are everything is not going to go exactly according to plan. So scheduling a free day in there can be a good idea. You know, maybe you are over there and you hear about something, you know, really amazing that you want to check out, but you've already purchased all of your tickets for the whole rest of the trip. You know, you don't want to be too rigid in your plans. So I know that most of us rely these days on like GPS directions and apps on our phone. But when you're abroad, you're not always going to have access to your data, or you're not actually always going to have access to Wi-Fi. So it is a really good idea to either have like an actual physical map or to like download something onto your phone that you can access without data. And then, make sure to ask locals for advice. There's only so much that you can find online. So you can go to a travel forum and you can talk to people that have been somewhere, a lot of times. But really one of the best ways to get into those kind of like secret, really cool areas is to ask the people that live there. So, if you're at your hostel or your hotel, ask somebody at the front desk, ask your tour guide, that kind of thing. And they should be able to give you some good suggestions about places to check out. Of course, in order to ask somebody at the front desk, you have to have found lodging. And there are, different types of options for lodging. No matter what, you're going to want to do your research ahead of time, because you do want to make sure that the location that you've chosen is, central to where you want to be. You want to make sure that like there are decent reviews. Some people are more adventurous than me. I probably would not go somewhere that didn't have any reviews. Just because I don't want to be the guinea pig, the first person that was there and kind of have an unpleasant surprise. The first option that I'm going to talk about is hostels. And hostels can vary so much by like both price and amenities. I have stayed in some hostels that I probably now would just like turn around and walk out of. And I've stayed in some hostels that are like nicer than the hotel rooms I've stayed in. So don't always choose the cheapest option. Make sure that you're looking at those reviews. If you are a female traveler, there are often single gender rooms. So sometimes hostels might be like, hey, here's a room with like 10 bunk beds, anybody can go in there. Or for a little bit more, maybe they're like, okay, here's a room with 6 beds and it's only, women are allowed to stay in that room. I know when I was traveling, I did feel safer and more secure when I was in those particular, like those single gender rooms. And then there are like organizations that you can work through, like Hosteling International, where they have, hostels all over, and you can go and take a look and see photos and all of that. Of course, hotels are always an option. You just want to make sure that you're checking things like in and out times, because they might vary from the US norms. And then, now there's Airbnb. The one thing I'd say about Airbnb is look at the cancellation policies, because some of them, it's like once you book it, it doesn't matter how far away it is, you're locked into that reservation. So just make sure that they have some flexibility in their cancellation policy, because things come up. So one thing that people might not think a lot about if you're only planning on going for like a short trip and not like a long stay is a visa. Now, depending on what country of citizenship you have, so where your passport is from, there may be a lot of countries that you can enter without having to get a visa ahead of time. There are a lot of places that if you are a US citizen, you can get into without having a visa, as long as you're only staying for a limited amount of time. But that is not every country. So before you book your plans and your tickets and you go, just make sure if there's any additional requirements that you are going to need to do. Like I do think that there are some changes coming for visitors to Europe where US citizens might not have to get visas, but they have to do like some kind of registration ahead of time. So just make sure that you're not going to have any issues at the border trying to enter the country. Of course, packing is also going to be important. I think I'm gonna need to probably download this and send this to my mom, because especially this part about not overpacking. But suggestions from my own experience and others: don't pack the night before. You're probably going to forget something. It is a good idea, even for people who are not into checklists and lists, it is really good to make a checklist for packing. Think about what are your essentials. And when I say essentials, I'm talking like things like, your medication, your technology, your important documents. Versatile clothing options are always the best to choose when traveling. And if you don't wear it at home, don't bring it abroad. If you don't wear it at home, you're probably not gonna wear it anywhere. And don't bring anything precious to you that you can't live without. Wait. Yes, no, sorry, I totally twisted myself up there. do bring something that you can't live without. And of course, always comfortable shoes. Many years ago when I studied abroad, I decided that if I wore tennis shoes, I was going to be outed as an American and people were going to react to me poorly. So I decided not to bring tennis shoes for my, academic year abroad. And that was a terrible idea. I mean, I had to traipse all around Europe in like my Doc Martens, and it just wasn't the best experience. So please learn from my mistake and bring comfortable shoes. So do not bring those precious items like grandma's heirloom ring or, the necklace that you've had forever. You don't want to bring anything that you are going to be in a position to lose. And then check airline baggage requirements. So, and then if you can, weigh your bag ahead of time. Because like it is, you see those people at the airports that are like trying to like move everything between bags so that they're not having an overage charge. You don't want that to be you. I do see that we have a question. Stephanie, did you have a question to ask?
Yes. I was wondering if you had any advice or how to pack light. Like, how do you, what's the word? Like, make sure that, you can pack a lot into your bag, like one bag where it stays efficient?
That is a great question. I think that, let's see. I think choosing like lighter options is one thing that's going to help. So like with the shoes, don't bring like super heavy items individually. You don't need to bring like your liters of shampoo and conditioner. If you're bringing your clothing items, regardless of how they're packed into there, it's going to weigh the same. But if you want to be able to fit as much in there as possible, I usually go with the roll method where I roll everything super tight. And then there's also things like packing cubes that some people can use if you really want to make sure that you're sorting everything good. And it looks like Ryan has some suggestions as well. Ryan's the assistant director of study abroad, so he is going to chime in here with a suggestion of his own.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Good question, Stephanie. And for me, my wife and I, we lived in Vietnam for 4 years, and we very much got into this idea of traveling as light as possible because there was no way we were going to lug a suitcase with us everywhere we went. So we did all of our vacations via just backpacks. And I don't mean like really big backpacks, just like a weekend bag kind of thing. And part of the way we were able to do that is just plan on washing your own clothes. Take 3 to 5 days worth of clothes and then plan on washing them. You might have facilities there where you're staying that you can wash, or you might just take some basic detergent with you, properly sealed in a bag and following all FAA requirements. But just plan on washing clothes, hanging them in the shower. Make sure you pack things that dry quickly if you're going to do that, so that you're not stuck carrying around wet clothes. But that's one way that we really cut down our bag weight, by just not needing to take as many clothes.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion. I didn't even come to mind, but I've definitely done that as well. Just like I put, like if I needed to wash my clothes one time, just putting like a little laundry soap in like a shampoo bottle, and then doing that. Davion, did you have a question?
Yes. Would it be better to buy things after you leave, like when you get there?
I think for that, it really depends, like how long are you going to be there? If you're going on a study abroad trip, it may be worth it to purchase some things while you're there, because if you're going to be somewhere for several months or even like up to a year, you're going to need to purchase stuff anyway. But if you're only going for a little while, you really want to kind of balance what you are going to purchase abroad, just because sometimes it might be more expensive, depending on the exchange rate. Sometimes there might not be things that you usually use that are available abroad. Like I'm not super picky about laundry detergent, but I am super picky about shampoo. So like I am not going to pack my liter of shampoo, but I'm probably going to pack some. So if you are kind of okay with like the shampoo that's available in like the hotel or just picking up something super cheap, you could probably save money on that. Yeah, Ryan?
Yeah, definitely a good answer. And just chiming in on that, a good way to find out is to research and find maybe like expat communities that live there in that country where you're going, and reach out to them and see, hey, what's easily and readily available there that I don't need to bring with me, or are there some things that you absolutely wish you would have brought from the States? Those are really good communities to find for that information. And if you're taking any kind of electronics, especially heat producing electronics like blow dryers, straighteners. Again, like Kate said, depending on the length of your program, you might consider buying if you're going to be there long term, definitely consider buying those there locally, since they'll be set for the right voltage.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going for a week, I probably wouldn't purchase a hair dryer, but like when I went on my study abroad program, I did purchase like a cheap hair dryer and some hair tools, while I was there, because I 100% would have like blown something up. And you don't want to have like a really nice like hair tool and then melt it by plugging it into the wrong plug. All right, if there's no more questions on this one, I'll go to the next section. So this is going to be while you're abroad. And this is actually going to be a little bit of a smaller section, because if you've planned correctly, there really are less things that you need to kind of plan for and do and consider, because you're going to be just busy traveling around and enjoying yourself. So I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that this was both for students that, were looking at studying abroad, and students that maybe didn't know or didn't think that that would be in the cards for them. But if you are considering studying abroad, you probably are not planning on staying in just that one location. And so you may be in a position where you're trying to choose like another location to travel to on top of your program location. And in that case, there are some additional things that you're going to want to think about. So, think about where you're studying, like what areas are easy to get to from your location. Also consider if any kinds of excursions are already included. As certain types of study abroad programs will include day or weekend trips, either in your country of study or in the surrounding areas. So make sure that there isn't something already available to you that you wouldn't have to plan for, or that you maybe already paid for that you would be doubling up on. Also consider, is anyone else that you're studying with, anybody in your classes, anyone in your program interested in tagging along? It is always safer to go with at least one other person, especially if you are, a woman. And so if you want to go travel somewhere, just see if anybody else is interested in jumping on that trip with you. It is also worth considering, if you are going to look for somebody to travel with, that you have kind of similar ideas about travel. So if you're somebody that's like, I just want to get on a train and go somewhere, maybe the person that wants to make like an exhaustive itinerary, maybe you're not going to be the best fit. On the other hand, if you are like, hey, cool, I don't have to make the itinerary myself, they're going to do it for me, then maybe that person is a good choice. Also check with your site director for ideas and suggestions. They probably have some great ideas about places that other students have gone, or maybe places that they enjoy traveling to. And then also consider, how much time do you have? So if you are, traveling just over the weekend, you probably don't want to take a train for 10 hours getting to another country. It can be super tempting because it's so easy to access other countries in a lot of the world, especially if you're kind of used to here, where you have to, you drive 10 hours and you're still in Texas. But even like within Europe and within, Asia and different places, it's like you can travel to maybe like just a little bit further than you are and be immersed in a completely different culture, just because, the countries are smaller than we're used to. And so if you are, even if you just go 4 hours away, you could be experiencing a completely different, language and culture and everything. So don't think that you need to spend, 10 hours traveling to somewhere to get to see something new. And of course, we're always going to talk about safety. You always want to be aware of the customs of the country that you're in. And this is for whether you're traveling on a study abroad program, whether you're just traveling for fun, and anything where you're kind of going somewhere else. Certain activities that might be, if not appreciated here, acceptable or tolerated, such as drinking to excess, might be less tolerated there. There are also dangers to drinking too much in an unfamiliar surrounding. If you're kind of not really familiar with where you are and, you're drinking too much, there are risks to that. And also always buy your own drinks. Again, I'm going to suggest that you go out with another person if you can, and then come back with that same person. And avoid doing illegal drugs. This isn't just us like saying this from, a place of, that you shouldn't be doing these drugs, but it's also a significant danger as far as not only like your health and your safety, but legally. Drugs account for almost half of Americans arrested abroad. And if you need any proof of that, there's like a whole series on Nat Geo called Locked Up Abroad. And so just stay away from that, just stay away from it. And then don't travel with or share your travel plans with somebody that you don't know really well. You also want to consider how money might impact your safety. So you probably don't want to like carry a huge roll of cash on you. Most countries that you go to are going to have like cash easily accessible from ATMs. So as long as you are aware ahead of time of how to access your money, don't probably take out a bunch of cash ahead of time. And find a place that you can carry that securely so that it can't be accessed like through your purse or through a backpack. You always want to stay away from demonstrations and protests, even if it's something that you're super interested in and maybe agree with them. You are a guest in that country, and so you don't need to be inserting yourself into that. And then always just stay aware of your surroundings and listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong or feels weird or you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to need a concrete reason to get out of there. Like just go, just listen to your instincts, and keeping yourself safe is always priority number one. So when you are traveling anywhere, you want to keep that in mind, the fact that you are a guest. And that is a big part of making sure that you are respecting cultural differences. So when you are going somewhere to another country, they are probably going to do certain things differently. Maybe not everything, but maybe the way that gender roles work are different. Maybe the way that you interact with and speak to strangers. One thing that is kind of like a surface level kind of cultural difference is, tipping at restaurants. In the US, if you go to a restaurant and you don't tip, that's awful, right? That's something kind of really terrible to do unless you had like just horrible service. But there are some countries in which, maybe you don't have to tip as much or you don't have to tip at all, but be aware of that beforehand. And take cues from the people around you. So if you see, everybody else kind of doing something, maybe that is something that is acceptable in that context. So take your cues from locals and people that are aware of that culture. And then finally, always remember that you're a guest. You can't expect when you're a visitor in another country for them to adhere to your expectations about these things. And so you don't want to put yourself in necessarily like a really uncomfortable situation and something that maybe you're not okay with, but you can always leave, and you just always want to make sure that you're not expecting somebody else to change the way that they are when you are a guest in their country. So now we're going to take a little bit of a virtual tour. So I picked out some locations that I just thought were really interesting, both places that I have been or places that I would like to go. And these are some things that you can do like online. So, maybe right now traveling to Machu Picchu is not quite an option, but that doesn't mean that you can't try to explore that destination a little bit. So I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment so that I can kind of move us over to this virtual tour. And I'm going to go through a couple of these. I am going to leave room for questions at the end. And then I do have a couple other suggestions that we're going to share a document with you so you can access those.
And Kate, while you're loading up that next screen, just a reminder, like what Kate was talking about with understanding how to interact with people in different cultures, especially when you're a guest there. Our next Study Abroad Success Series session will actually be about intercultural communication and bridging cultures. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for our next session.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Ryan. I totally forgot to mention that. We're going to talk about it at the end, but yeah, if you're looking at that, you're like, I don't know how to be a guest in another country. They're going to show you that. So I think you can see probably why I chose this virtual tour. It has amazing images, but I'm going to go through this just a little bit. So some of these are just pictures, but some of them are like these 360-degree images. So you can drag it around, and it's kind of like you are at that location. And I just think that this is it's like you can come here and you don't have to walk up the hill, right? Obviously, it's nothing like actually being at Machu Picchu, but if you, close your eyes and squint, you are getting away for a little bit at least. And I think it is kind of amazing how they can do this. There are some virtual tours that are for like VR goggles. So if you are super techie and have something cool like that, you could search for tours specifically, and that is even going to be probably a much more cool experience. But I definitely do not have those at my disposal. And it wouldn't be a trip to Machu Picchu, virtual or otherwise, if we didn't look at the alpacas. There they are, just chilling out. So yeah, so this is, kind of one of the virtual tours. I thought this was one of the coolest ones. I really like that you can do the 360-degree angles so that you can really get an idea of how kind of like amazing this location is. Okay, the next thing that we are going to look at is the Louvre Museum in Paris, France. So I tried to pick places that were kind of like, some natural beauty, some museums, stuff like that. So for the Louvre, let's say that we're like, oh, cool, founding myths, Hercules to Darth Vader. You can kind of click the room that you're interested in going on. And then this is a little bit different. There is some like movement that you can do, but it's almost more like if you've ever done anything on like Google Streets, where you kind of like click on the arrow to go closer, but then you can kind of zoom in and see what's available in this room at the Louvre. And you can also click on information to see like what information they present on that particular piece of art. And then like I wouldn't even know what's in these different areas, but you can like navigate around the room that way as well. So if you want to look at the information, about these particular items, you can do that. And then you can go, they have lots of different rooms that are available so that you can kind of go all over. They have, 2 different pages, so it's not the entire museum, but it is going to be like a lot of really cool things that you aren't going to be able to see otherwise. Unless you're there, but you can kind of see it in context. And I think that is a really like kind of interesting way to do that. So you can see not only like the picture, just a picture online, but you're seeing what it looks like displayed in that museum. So the next place, we're going to just take a quick little tour over to Rome and the Colosseum. And this is almost more like a walking tour. If you have, this is like Google Street View. So as you can see, it's like you can kind of walk all the way through the Colosseum. And it's really actually kind of, like I've been to the Colosseum, and it's really interesting doing this because it is, I mean, this is exactly what it looks like. So it's not edited or changed in any fashion. I mean, it's not just like the pictures you see where they're only showing kind of like the ancient ruins. It's like you get to see the little signs over here in the trash can. So it does give you a little bit of a more realistic experience. I did want to go, there's a guy sitting there texting somebody. And then you can go like all over. So you can see, the center, you can see like the remnants of the pits down here. And then of course, an image that most people probably have seen at least one time before. But you do get that 360-degree view, which I think is really cool. You can go all over with that. And then finally, this is not a place that I've ever been. I just thought that these pictures were really amazing, and it has kind of now gone onto my list. So this is a temple in Indonesia. And this again is one of these 360-degree tours. And this is like, I mean, I had trouble believing this was like an actual real place on Earth when I saw these pictures, because it is just looks like amazing and beautiful. But you can do the 360-degree angles, and they have all of these different locations over here so that you can see like different times of the day from different perspectives, and see everybody else enjoying it. Can pretend that you're, in a crowd of people making new friends without risk. But this is probably my favorite of all of the tours, just because I thought that this was a really unique thing that until I started exploring virtual tours, is, maybe most people know about this. I did not. And so I was really, I really enjoyed seeing something kind of new and exciting that I hadn't been aware of before. So that is kind of the end of our presentation. I am going to go back to my screen so that you can see our presentation, because we have some additional tour links. You don't have to worry about copying these. These are just some other cool options that I found online. So you can see like the Uffizi Gallery, Pyramids of Giza, Mount Fuji, all of these different places have very similar virtual tours. You kind of take your time and look through them. And then we also have some additional resources. So if you want to do, like you're looking at going somewhere and you want to see, the safety and travel advisories, or here are some of those flight searches and fare specials that I talked about, as well as like some hostel lodging organizations. So Ryan is going to go ahead and drop the links to download this presentation, both the entire presentation as well as just these resource slides, so that you can have access to those. And then I do hope that you consider coming to some of our other events. This was kind of our inaugural event, so hopefully any of our technical issues will not be repeated next time. But we have our Bridging Cultures event is on the 28th. So as Ryan mentioned, if you are kind of wanting to know more about that culture slide and how you can be, a responsible and respectful visitor and effectively connect with people from other cultures, that would be a great one to attend. And that's in collaboration with Global Engagement. And then we have a lot of other events too. Some of them are going to be really nice and practical, like smart budgeting. And some of them are just going to give you really important and helpful information about, how can you, like, understanding identity and minimizing the footsteps of oppression. How is that going to have, what influence does that have on, when you're visiting a new place? Like, how does your identity look at that? And then travel around the world in 60 minutes. We're going to have people there that are talking about like their experiences in other countries and becoming a global leader. So I hope that you can make it to some of those. But I really appreciate you taking the time to, visit with us here today, and that you were flexible with our technical issues. Ryan, it looks like, had his hand raised. I don't know if he has something to add.
Yeah, I just want to say, for that Bridging Culture session, if you're interested in that, check back in the Teams channel in the next day or two, and we'll be posting a link to a free assessment that you can do. It's called the Intercultural Effectiveness Scale, or IES, and it's something you can do that just lets you see where are you right now in terms of adaptability, in terms of understanding other people's cultures and appreciating them. It's a really good self-analysis tool, and we'll be talking about those results and how to analyze them during that session. So just a heads up on that.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so do you guys have any questions or any feedback or any, anything else that you'd like to mention? Ryan did drop those links in the chat, as well as a link to a session survey that we would really appreciate if you could take the time to fill out. I mentioned that this is really a new event for us, and so because of everything that's going on, we're trying to make alternative experiences for students. So we really would appreciate your feedback, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have now. Cool. So I'm